Hello, welcome to Wellness Wednesdays for Leadership in STEM. Today we'll be talking about personal branding, communicating fit, and designing job titles with Dr. Harrison for Pride Month. Dr. Tanya Harrison is a Mars expert who worked as a geoscientist and mission operations specialist on multiple NASA Mars missions over the past 13 years, including the Opportunity, Curiosity, and Perseverance rovers, and the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. She has served as the Director of Research for Arizona State University's NewSpace initiative, and currently works as the Director of Science Strategy for the federal arm of the Earth-observing satellite company, Planet Labs. She serves on the Board of Advisors for Explore Mars and Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, also known as SEDS, and the Board of Governors for the National Space Society. She's also a co-founder of the Zed Factor Fellowship. Her honors include 2 NASA Group Achievement Awards, the Amelia Earhart Fellowship, and the Vanier Canada Graduate Fellowship, which is Canada's most prestigious doctoral award. She was also named one of Via Satellite's Young People to Watch of 2018 and a Future Space Leader in 2019. Dr. Harrison has been featured on the National Geographic, the Weather Channel, BBC, Slate, Canada's The Globe and Mail, the Houston Chronicle, and Astronomy Magazine. Her first non-academic book, For All Humankind, made the #1 release on Amazon's Aeronautics and Astronautics book list. You can find her prolifically tweeting about the Red Planet and her experiences with both #Women in STEM and #Disabled in STEM at Tanya of Morris. I'll be inviting her on now. All right. Hello.
Hi. I don't know why whenever it switches to this, it kills my headphones, but we'll go with it.
Okay, we'll go with it. I would love to introduce myself to your audience really quickly so that they know what we're chatting about. So thank you just so much for being here. I'm Ricky. I'm an international graduate student from Singapore studying at Georgia Tech in the United States, and I'm currently working in the urban air mobility industry. I'm a Brooke Owens Fellow, and I host these chats every week because I truly believe that to succeed, you have to take utmost care of yourself intellectually, socially, spiritually, and physically first. And my goal is to empower the next generation of STEM leaders by encouraging them to use wellness tools to their advantage. With that, would it be okay if we jump into the topics at hand?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my gosh, so excited. I actually have goosebumps. As I was reading out your bio, I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. What a day.
Oh, thank you.
Deep breaths. Okay, so the first topic at hand is personal branding. Could you tell me and the audience a little bit about when you first started calling yourself a professional Martian? And can you take us back to how you first began to construct this specific personal brand?
Sure. I don't actually remember when I came up with that moniker. It's been a few years. I just remember the first time I ever used it was in a group writing session at ASU. We had Kim Stanley Robinson as our our author in residence or something like that for the year with the Interplanetary Initiative. And we had to go around the room, and there were maybe 20 people there, and everyone introduced themselves. And when it got around to me, I said, oh, I'm Dr. Tanya Harrison, and I'm a professional Martian. And Stan was like 2 or 3 people down from me, and he introduced himself. He was like, I guess I'm also a professional Martian. And I was like, I'm either honored or offended that you stole my title, but I'm going to start using that. And I used it from then on.
I love that. Oh, sorry, continue.
Oh, yeah, I guess I just picked it because I had spent my entire career up to that point working on things related to Mars. And so I was like, oh, I guess it's an apt moniker for the things that I do and decide to specialize on.
No, I truly, truly love that. And it's so like quirky and catchy. And I feel like your hair contributes to that as well. And every headshot ever contributes to just that aesthetic of the red planet. So I think it's just like so fitting. I was curious about how the brand has evolved as what you've wanted for yourself has expanded and evolved. So when you started working on Mars missions versus when you decided to write a book, or when you decided to just like take on the Nat Geo feature or the BBC feature, did you ever have a moment of checking whether the identity served you? Have you ever thought about like tweaking the brand a little bit as we grow? Could you just like walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, I definitely thought about it as things evolved, because I started to get worried that only branding myself as a Martian would be really limiting in the things that I could do. But despite that, I was still getting lots of interview requests from places like BBC, ITV, ABC News Australia, for things that had nothing to do with Mars, but more general stuff like women in STEM, the all-women spacewalk, for example, anything related to NewSpace industry type things through my position at the ASU NewSpace initiative. So people were coming to me through that. And so it felt like my worries were maybe a little bit unfounded, because I had already established myself in other areas as well. Like I had done published research on things that were beyond Mars. I was doing work at ASU that was beyond just doing things on Mars. And so I've shifted a little bit in that, like I updated my website. So now it's actually like TanyaofMars.com will still go to it, but I updated it to just like TanyaHarrison.com. It says Dr. Tanya Harrison rather than just Tanya of Mars. But I've kind of stuck with that name on Twitter because it's, people know it. Like they'll come up to me at conferences and say like, oh, you're Tanya of Mars from Twitter. I'm not sure half those people even know my last name. So it's like, well, I'll stick with it because it works. And you know, I still love Mars and do Mars stuff all the time. So it's still fitting, even though I also do other things now.
Right, absolutely. And for any new grads or students in university, do you have any advice on just like space loving professionals as they're trying to build that personal brand and identity, and how to essentially like hold room for all of the things that you can be, and also kind of claim whatever title, like giving yourself permission to claim the title, but also like giving room for it to expand to be multi like hyphenate. What advice do you have for just like some of the younger folks listening in right now?
I think the easiest way to carve out your niche is by picking that one thing that you want to be known for. And then that's kind of your core identity, but that doesn't stop you from having other pieces to your identity, right? Like you're an aerospace engineer, but you do a lot of other things besides aerospace engineering. So having something like, okay, I want my main platform to be, like when I think of you, for example, Ricky, I think of showing people opportunities in the aerospace industry for folks that are not US citizens. I know you talk about like tons of other things, but that's the first thing that comes to mind for me for you. And so you've done a really good job at you've done a great job at carving out that niche. And so like space is really broad, and even aerospace engineering is really broad. So what is it that you specialize in that you want to be able to share with the world, and you can use your other interests to kind of tag off of that, if that makes sense?
I love that. This is like kind of that check-in point where anyone listening or taking notes is like, okay, let me go rewind, watch that, take some notes. So kind of moving into the second topic, which is communicating fit. What role has this personal brand played in communicating your fit to people and organizations you've really wanted to work for, and not just work for, but lead?
That's a really good question. I like trying to think of the best place to start. Well, one, having a really strong personal brand was really good in terms of having opportunities come to me rather than having to individually seek out all the things that I wanted to do. Like through Twitter, for example, I had tons of like job opportunity, postdoc opportunities, like different offers come my way, which I was not expecting whatsoever. Also kind of random requests here and there. Like I put out to the world one day, my dream was to write an article for a magazine, and like 10 minutes later, I got a DM from one of the folks at Astronomy and was like, we need somebody to write the cover article for July. Do you want to? And I said, yes, absolutely. Like sign me up. So that helps. And then it was also a thing where other people would see like, oh, I saw a journalist looking for a Mars expert, and they would tag me and be like, you should talk to Tanya. So that's where building that personal brand really comes in handy, because it's not just you advocating for yourself. You're now hopefully creating a sea of advocates for you when they see things that make them think of you, and then you create a nice little network there. I feel like I've strayed from your actual question.
No, that was such a good response. Like, again, I have goosebumps. And I think the thought that's coming to mind is like, how can you use your personal brand to be a magnet for opportunities and like unlocking so many other things that you have. I feel like some of us don't even have the capacity to think of what can come our way, because it's not, we've never been told that that's possible for us, or maybe it's something that we don't even know. So I think this is such a great opportunity for people to like, one, like live like authentically and in alignment to build that brand, and then use that to attract like things beyond their wildest imagination.
Yeah, definitely. Use it to put yourself out there and like see what comes back. But on the other hand, you also still want to be really proactive. So you're putting in a lot of work building that brand. And eventually a lot of the things that did come my way in terms of job opportunities and such, it wasn't like, oh, this thing fell into my lap. It was, oh, I put in a ton of effort to like make these connections with people, to make sure that people knew what I was interested in, like putting out this call for writing for a magazine, or when Alaska Airlines was doing their Eclipse flight a few years ago, I half jokingly tweeted like, hey, can you all write to Alaska and see if I can get on this flight? And they called me and they were like, if you can get to Portland, we'll let you on this plane.
Wow.
So like just something silly like that, you never know what's going to happen. And that's really the magical side of social media. Like stuff that you never thought could happen to you can happen. And don't be afraid to ask for it, or like poke around and see what you can find.
I love that. And so what advice do you have for new grads, university students who are trying to communicate that fit effectively, but don't like, they might be like limiting themselves by like not putting themselves out there with a website or a portfolio, or a personal brand, or an updated LinkedIn profile, or a Twitter, whatever it may be. What advice do you have for them on the benefits of like having some sort of like online identity for their dream job and using it to communicate fit?
I think these days it's absolutely critical. You know, at the very least, I think a lot of folks, especially on the academic side, don't know much about LinkedIn. But I know like my company right now, for example, uses it to scout people. My boss has said that when she gets an application from somebody, the first thing she does is go to LinkedIn and see how many mutual connections that they have, to figure out like how that position is kind of, or how that person might be positioned in the industry. So as much as it's annoying to maintain multiple profiles all over the place, LinkedIn is actually really important. So I would definitely say that. There's also tons of free platforms out there where you can make a website, or places like Squarespace have discounted rates for students. So check those out if you want to build like a really good website, and that way you can craft whatever presence you want to have. You can use that to really convey your story, because it's not just about your experience in a lot of cases, it's about who you are as a person. Like there are a ton of people out there that might have similar experience to what you have, but kind of like anything in the world, if you have a good story, you can convey how passionate you are and how much you want to be in the industry, how much you want to do the thing that your dream job might be. That gets you really far. And so being able to have that presence that you craft, rather than just like, here's your resume and they don't get to see anything else, I think is really critical. So it's a little bit of a haul at the beginning to like put yourself out there, like create these things, but it will pay off in the end for sure.
This is so like crucial and important, and this is a message that I've been trying to put out there. When I get like questions about, oh, how did you do the things that you did as an international student? So I tell them, I'm like, these are my secrets, and I get like resistance because of the little bit of hard work that goes in like at the front end of like setting these things up. So I love that I have like a director at Planet Labs being able to just like emphasize how important this is, and just like being just so much more than just a director at Planet Labs, just like all the other things that I described you to be. just like how you can hold space for that through a simple website and a Twitter platform, which actually isn't like as simple, but thank you so much for sharing that message. I guess just following up to that, in terms of leading up to the position for the director of research, or even the director for science strategy currently, could you just share with us your biggest takeaways in terms of communicating fit for that leadership position? Like when folks are really good at what they're doing, but they're like kind of just like on that brink of like being a director versus like staying where they are.
Yeah, so a lot of it is about thinking about what experience you have and how it ties to the job that you're looking at. So doing things like crafting your resume and your cover letter very specifically to each job that you're applying for is so important. It's really obvious, like having looked at applications, it's very obvious when you just splattered out the exact same thing to a bunch of companies, or you did like a find and replace the company name with the next company name. Really look into like, what does this company do? What are their ethics? What are their goals? What are the actual things involved in the job that I'm applying for? And then how can I pick apart everything that I've ever done, even if it's something like being a teaching assistant or a research assistant? That's still valid experience. I remember when I was applying for faculty positions, like during my PhD, I went to the Career Counseling Center at the University of Western Ontario, and they were really helpful because I said, I don't have any teaching experience. And they said, well, you've been a TA for a few years, right? That is teaching experience. And I was like, oh, you're right. I didn't think about that because I was a student, so I discounted it as experience. So even things like that, working on, maybe if you're in a rocketry club at the university, like that's not necessarily like on the job experience, but it's something you can say that you've done. So thinking about those things, it's not disingenuous to say that you have that experience. You just have to be really clever about how you craft it into the application. And then of course, I'm sure everyone has heard this time and time again, even if you don't meet all of the requirements, go ahead and apply anyway. I applied for, I think, 3 different jobs at Planet over the course of 3 years, 2 or 3 years, that I definitely didn't meet all the requirements for. I didn't get hired for any of them, but I also spent all that time networking with people at the company, kind of inserting myself in any way that I could to be like, I know that I'm a good candidate for you. I just have to figure out how to get you to recognize it. And I think that's where the step up toward leadership really came from, because eventually the job that I have right now came from Planet calling me and saying, hey, we need somebody with this really unique.
We love that.
I feel very lucky to have had that experience. I'm not gonna lie. And it came to this point of like, we need someone with a really specific fusion of skill sets that we know you have. And you know how we know you have it? Because you've been telling us for the last 3 years and we've seen it. So sometimes it's the long game, but it pays off in the end. Like this is the cool, this is the happiest I've ever been in a job. And so like, it was a lot of upfront effort, but like I said before, this kind of stuff pays off in the long run. You just have to be really patient and really, really persistent.
Yeah, I think that is such an important message for even any international students who are kind of listening to this, with Planet being a company that is so like welcoming to foreign nationals, but knowing that like, even for the director role, like things don't always just get like presented on a silver platter. Like you are doing that upfront work, like you're putting yourself out there, you're building those connections for 3 years before like you get that thing that like unlocks so much like happiness for you. I think that sometimes like looking in from the outside, you feel like, oh wow, this looks like a perfect set of experiences. Like, of course this happened. But I think it's like having that compassion for yourself, so that you can be patient, so that you can like strive for those 3 years or however many years it may take. I don't think that folks talk about this enough, so I'm just so grateful for you like sharing both your power and your honesty. Thank you so much.
No worries. I think we attribute a lot of things to luck, when it's really like that discounts a lot of the hard work that goes into it, both for ourselves and looking at other people and the things that they've done in their career or the things that they've gotten the opportunity to do. And so I think when you approach it that way, it can kind of seem like, oh, well, you know, I'm not that lucky, that kind of thing won't happen to me. But if that's a really defeatist attitude, right? So if you approach it with positivity and you say, I want this to happen, I'm going to figure out what steps I need to make that happen, that's when stuff really starts to unlock for you. Like when you and I were chatting on the phone earlier, you know, I made up my own job title at Planet because I was like, what is my long-term career goal? Okay, it's this. So to reach that, what does my job title need to be now to reach my ultimate goal? And so I crafted that very carefully to plan this longer term trajectory. And I've been doing that kind of the whole way along, like deciding to get a PhD versus not. Okay, well, at that point, my ultimate goal was to be the head of a Mars mission. So I'm like, okay, to do that, let me find the steps between where I am and where I want to be. So having that penultimate goal is really important. And then, yeah, not discounting people for being lucky to have gotten where they are, because, you know, there's a lot of stuff in between that maybe they did meet the right person at the right time, but say that was at a conference. You took the initiative to show up at that conference in the first place, or maybe you took the initiative to send an email to someone who happened to be the right person. It's rarely just, you know, oh, I ran into someone in an elevator at a random place and they offered me a job at SpaceX. Like, it's not that. I doubt that's ever happened to anybody. So yeah, you can make these things happen for yourself. That probably sounds really cheesy, but it is also the thing that sets you, if you're really proactive, it sets you apart from everybody else that's not. There are a lot of people out there with this defeatist attitude. There are a lot of people out there that are not willing to put in the legwork and try for these things. You know, they might just be blindly sending out resumes and they just don't want to do more than that. So if it's something that you really want, you have to make it happen for yourself.
Absolutely. And I think that not having a defeatist attitude is the core of like it's at the core of my message for international students, because the other option that like, it's like there's hope and then there's giving up. So if you're not like putting your eggs into the basket of like hope, possibility, and limitlessness, then you're giving up. Like there's, you know, like if you could choose to believe that you could be the director, why would you not? Why would you not choose to believe that? So thank you so much for sharing that, because I think another thing that I really took away from that was just asking for what you want. It's not being lucky. It's asking for what you want, creating the title that you want, calling yourself by the identity that you want to assume. And you do that so well, which is like why you're here, kind of like aligned with the Wellness for Leadership message. So again, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, so kind of moving into the last topic, which is designing job titles, which we've touched on a little bit. Could you go back a little bit and just tell us about like casting that vision to design the leadership role? So I think you mentioned this a little bit in terms of like knowing that you wanted to lead the Mars mission, so you had to kind of like map out the steps between like where you were to there. Could you break down a little bit like what that actually looks like? Because I think a lot of students know in theory that that's what they have to do, but there's like the people that are like the trailblazers that like make it because they're holding so much like creativity and like vision in their like heart and mind. So could you just like share a little bit what that process of unlocking the creativity and vision is for you, like when you're trying to like track that out?
So I guess for the Mars things, I started out with like looking at people that were in positions that I wanted to be in and kind of doing some research on them online to figure out like what was their path, what kind of things did they study, where did they go to school, what jobs had they had to get them to that point. And even then I kind of ended up in a really non-traditional route because I left academia, went into industry. So then I was looking at like how people at the company that I was working at had made their way into positions of leadership on missions. And there I had a chief engineer at the company who ended up being kind of a good mentor, who was saying like, oh, you know, you don't need to go back to school for a PhD. I think it's a waste of time. If you actually just stay here and work for 4 years, it'll put you in a better position than if you left and went to school for 4 years. the reasons why I ended up going back to school are for a whole nother live chat that we can talk about some other time. But I did end up going back to school to get a PhD. And then when it came to Planet, this was a really unique opportunity in that when they called me and offered me this job, I asked them in like salary negotiations and those type of discussions, like, what is the job title, so that I knew where to start with what to negotiate for. And they didn't have one. They were just like, well, we want you, we'll figure out the other stuff later. So I came in and I made up they hired me at like a manager level. And so I came up with the title that I wanted for that. And then I'd had a discussion at some point with my boss about like mapping out like what was my long-term goal at Planet. And I remember the week that I started, we had this week of onboarding meetings at the headquarters in San Francisco. And I was talking to the VP of Space Systems, who I'd known from before, from all the times I'd gone and hung out at Planet to get people to think I was cool. And everyone was really shocked that first week because they're like, how do we steal you from Mars? I'm like, well, Planet's cool. But this guy asked me, he said, what is your long-term goal here? And I said, I want to become your chief scientist. I know it's not a role that exists yet, but I'm going to convince you that it should so that I can create it. And he just kind of smiled at me. So then I went off and I looked at other companies and figured out, what exactly do chief scientists at other aerospace companies do? So I could look at sort of their roles and responsibilities and then try to craft something that I thought tied into the vision of a role like that eventually. And the common theme I was seeing was like large scale strategy related to scientific decisions at the company. I said, okay. So then I went back to my boss. This was about a year after I'd worked at Planet, or after I started working at Planet. And I said, I want a promotion to director and I want to change my title to director of science strategy.
I have goosebumps again.
I literally, it's about being proactive. You have to ask for what you want. And it's okay to do this at companies. Like, you will very rarely get a raise or a promotion or anything like that without asking for it. Like, you have to advocate for yourself. And I've done that at previous jobs and it doesn't always work. Sometimes they'll say no, or they'll say, we have a set time period when this will happen. We'll reevaluate in however many months' time. My boss was like, sounds good to me. So it only took a year to go from like manager to director. I don't know how long that would have taken if I hadn't gone in and said, look at what I've done in the last year. I think I deserve to be promoted. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself in those situations. And then, this ability to like craft your title and this vision forward might be much more restricted in certain areas. If you're going into like, I'm assuming here because I haven't worked for these companies, but if you're at like a Boeing or a Lockheed, there's probably a lot more of a rigid ladder of like you go in and you make your way through. But this is actually what I really like about working for these smaller NewSpace type companies, because they're kind of making it up as they go along too a lot of the time. They need people that are all-rounders, or they need people that are like hyper specific for the thing that this company is doing. So there's a lot more opportunity to craft your trajectory at a place like that than you could at, say, a large traditional aerospace company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think thank you for sharing all your secrets. This is what like these like live discussions are about, like leaders just like opening the door and like allowing us to peek into like what that actually looks like, but then being very like real about the timelines and like what the research looks like to prepare yourself. So gonna rewatch this. Thank you so much for sharing. I have a couple more questions for you as we kind of like wrap up the 3 topics. So what does success in STEM mean to you?
Like personally or overall?
Personally, it could be personally, overall, whatever that came up when I asked you that question.
I think the first thing that came up, probably because I'm talking to you, is getting more people in from more backgrounds. We still have a long way to go in that regard. Like right now on the NASA side of things, the Mars workforce is like 27% women, compared to when the UAE sent their HOPE mission to Mars earlier this year. Something like 85% of the science team are women, which blew my mind. Like, that's so cool. So I can see that these things are changing. Every time I go to a conference, there's this growing dichotomy between the older white men and then maybe the like under 40, under 35, that looks a lot more like, you know, us kind of thing. And that makes me really happy. But we still have problems with people being harassed and driven out of the field. We still have problems with international students being able to get jobs. Part of the reason that I'm in the US is because I was worried I wouldn't be able to find a job in Canada. And a lot of students actually that graduated from my PhD program are now working in the US. So it's not just a US thing, like the limited jobs also exist across the border. But yeah, I think that we, especially with like the state of the world right now, STEM education is so important. And beyond like just getting people to become scientists and engineers, I just want people to be curious and learn how to ask questions and think about things logically and reasonably, and like use the scientific method in their day-to-day life so that they can better parse information that they're being fed by whatever they're reading online or whatever they're seeing on the news. So there's like that hope for the general public, and then getting more people to be interested in STEM, and then retaining more people in STEM in the long term.
No, I love that. That's so beautiful. And I think just as a international student who like has been harassed, I think like standing in my power by looking to people like yourself is so powerful. Like I am able to carry on because of folks like you. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Okay, 3 more questions. So the first one is, what does effective leadership mean to you?
I think it's a good balance between compassion and command. You have to understand like how to steer the ship, so to speak. I'm saying that because I see one of my friends is dialed in, so hopefully he's still online to appreciate that reference. But also care for the people that work underneath you and recognize that they are human and they have day-to-day life needs that extend beyond work. I have not always worked for people that were effective leaders in that way, but I've been lucky enough to work under like 2 people in particular that were really good at both of those things. They could command a room. They were good at delegating tasks. They were good at just keeping things on the ball, good at creating a long-term vision and executing on that, which I think are all really key things. Then they were also really great about being caring about the people that were underneath them, you know, understanding folks that had kids if they needed to take time off, or like with my health issues, both of these people were really, really understanding in that regard. And recognizing that, you know, how you're producing isn't necessarily defined by sitting at your desk in a cubicle from 9 to 5 and pumping out stuff. It's okay, whatever hours you need to work to get your job done and do it well, like we'll work around that kind of stuff. And I think we need a lot more people like that in positions of leadership that understand that we are whole people, and then the world will be just a lot better place in general.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love just like compassion there. Like that was so good. Okay. What does wellness mean to you?
I think that also ties to that whole person aspect. I admit this is something that I'm not the best at because I don't have a great work-life balance, partially because I love what I do so much. A lot of the time it doesn't feel like work. So I might be writing on the weekend or like checking emails or looking at photos from the satellites because I just enjoy it. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if you're working because you feel like you have to, that's different than working all the times you feel like you have to versus working all the time because you want to. These are 2 different things. But understanding that it is okay to take a break. It is, you know, if you're getting your job done, it is okay to not check your email at like 10 p.m. And especially like for any grad students that are listening, you do not have to work on your thesis 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So many of my friends in my PhD lab group, like they would feel guilty if they weren't working every moment of the day. And I tried to set very firm boundaries in that unless I had to, I was not going to work on my thesis on the weekends because I was busy doing other things. And for the most part that worked. And I would have to coax other people, be like, put your computer down, like come with me into the city, we're just going to go and like wander around and eat delicious food, and your thesis will be there when you get back. It's not going to extend your graduation time by like a year if you take the weekend off and relax and exist as a person. I think some of that stress comes from advisors, but a lot of it is just kind of culturally impressed upon us. You know, you look at social media and you see how hard all these students are working, but you're really just going to burn yourself out, and you're not going to be producing your best work anyway. So take care of yourself, take breaks, sleep. That's something I also don't do enough of, so I will learn to practice what I preach someday, hopefully. But yeah, figuring out what you need to have that balance to be a healthy person, or as healthy as you can possibly be, that is what will make you the most productive and the happiest in the end.
I love that. Thank you. Just, yeah, for emphasizing how we need to be whole and authentic, and then communicate that like everywhere, and then how that just like unlocks everything that like we hold in our heart. Is there anything that you feel like you wanted to elaborate on that you didn't get a chance to elaborate on, or anything left that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would rewind a little bit to the discussion that we had about like an online presence and like the amount of work involved in setting that up. I would say one thing that to maybe bring people's minds at ease a little bit is that you don't have to be everywhere. So you could pick one platform that you want to focus on and use that as the thing to craft your brand. For me, that's been Twitter. I don't use Instagram all that much. For all the stuff I do in front of the camera, I don't actually like being on camera all that much. I don't like looking at myself because I have some, you know, self-image issues with like my skin and stuff. So I'd rather sit behind a keyboard and type, and then I can think about the things I'm going to say. I can be in pajamas and have messy hair. No one knows what I look like. But, you know, if you want to craft something like you have mastered TikTok or Instagram stories, or you're posting them on
Reels, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, I'm sorry, I get them confused.
No, don't apologize. You're fine.
Yeah, so you've mastered Reels. And so like you've carved out a really good niche there for yourself. And then there's like some people that have mastered TikTok for sharing their message. So pick the thing that resonates with you the most. You don't have to be everywhere. You don't have to do everything. If you build your presence on one platform, that's really enough. Don't burn yourself out by trying to have like 7 different social media profiles.
No, absolutely. And I think that currently with social media, there's a lot of ways to like monetize what we're doing. I think that when you see like different people using things to monetize stuff versus others trying to just like communicate their message, you can like choose whichever way. Like you don't have to like feel pressured to just like do one or just the other. I think there's like a lot of stuff that we see, a lot of information that we consume, and a lot of like what's it called, read between the lines information that we consume of, oh, what must have gone into this ad, or what must have gone into this book. Like you don't have to like do the ads, do the books, do the film presences, like all of it at once. Like I think we can all just like breathe a little and like focus on like the message that we want to share, and not get caught up in the stress or the pressure of comparing ourselves to what I guess other folks and anyone else is doing.
Yeah, that can certainly be stressful. And I'll admit, like, I fall victim to that sometimes as well. I'll see things other people are doing and I'll be like, oh man, like when people were blowing up on TikTok during the pandemic, I was like, man, I guess I should really set up a TikTok. And I'm
Maybe
like,
we should dance.
that's so much effort. Like, I'll probably post something on TikTok at some point. I have a profile with no videos on it, but like remembering that I didn't have to be everywhere all the time was really helpful. And I had a really good conversation with a friend of mine who is a professor at ASU, who was like, Tanya, you don't have to hustle anymore. You've made it. You are where you want to be. So now you can relax. And hearing that was like this huge weight being lifted off my shoulders, because I worked so hard to get to where I am, and, you know, a lot of sleepless nights and like a lot of sacrifices, but eventually it got me to where I am right now. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I don't have to be doing as much as I was before. And surprisingly, like, I was way more active on social media when I was a grad student than I am now, because I don't have nearly enough time to be on social media.
Yep.
So it's like, utilize that opportunity that you have if you're a student to have the time to invest in that, because you won't have to invest that much time forever unless you really want to. And, you know, I think the other thing is, like, if you look at the way that different people are utilizing their platforms, some people are like, they're trying to make things like communication their full-time gig, and so they're investing a lot of energy into it because they have to. But if that's not your goal, don't compare yourself to people that are doing that, because they presumably have a lot more time and resources to be focusing on that than you might be able to as like a full-time student or somebody that has a full-time job. You can try to do both at the same time, but again, you might burn yourself out. So yeah, like, look at what the people are attempting to accomplish that you're looking at, and see like what parallels are there. Are they doing things that you might want to do? You can like learn from them or emulate without, you know, straight up copying people. Yeah, but they might also just be doing things that you don't want to do or you don't need to do. So try not to compare yourself too much to other people like that. At the end of the day, we all have our own messages. We all have our own branding. There can never be too many people out there talking to the world about how awesome space is. So, you know, do it your way, and your message might resonate with different people in a different way than someone else's message might. And so all those voices are valid. All of those ways of conveying information are valid.
Absolutely. Yeah. There can never be too many, because you don't know like whose video or content you will see that like just like makes it click for you in whatever way. So I guess I just wanted to end by sharing that like people can find you still at Tanya Mars, and if you wanted to plug your book, because it's incredible and I think that everyone should get it and read it.
Oh yeah, it's actually behind the camera. Let me grab it.
Perfect.
So yeah, I have a book out called For All Humankind. I don't know if it's backwards for everybody else or just me. But this is actually a book about the international visions of the Apollo 11 moon landing. So my co-author Danny Benner and I interviewed people from around the world who watched or listened to the moon landing live to see what it was like for them. Did they see this as a human achievement or an American achievement? And what did they think that it was going to tell us about the future of humanity? It was an extremely emotional experience, like getting to talk to all of these people. It made me wish that I was, whoops, sorry, my battery almost died there.
Oh, lost you for a sec. You're fine.
Yeah, it made me wish I was around for the Apollo moon landing even more than I already wished I had, but it made me excited for hopefully being around when humans land on Mars, because I think we'll get similar stories like this. You can get it on Amazon or local booksellers if you don't want to buy off Amazon. And actually, for the next month, we're going to be collecting all of the profits from the sale of this book. I'm going to put it on my website, like probably in a few hours. It's on my to-do list for today. But all the profits from the sales are going to go to St. Jude Cancer Research Center as part of the Inspiration 4 mission to raise funds for Dr. Sam Proctor's goal of raising $50,000. So if you buy it in July, you can help support cancer research for kids. So definitely pick up a copy.
Yeah, this was like a much better plug than me just like holding up my copy. So thank you for sharing. And yeah, today was just like the best day ever because I got to talk to you, and thank you for truly like making space for everyone, and people like myself, and people who are like not gonna cry on the sidelines peeking in. Yeah, I got through so much because of you, and I am so grateful. Thank you for everything you do.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Like, now I want to cry just hearing that.
Oh my God. And thank you for creating the Zed Factor Fellowship, which has, you know, accepted like an international student, and now I get to like mentor her like from the side, and it's just changing lives, and that has a ripple effect. And yeah, all I have to say is thank you. Like, I don't know like how else to just express my gratitude, but I will be posting this on my IGTV, and you can go rewatch it, share it, tweet it. Yeah, thank you so much for being on.
Oh, thank you. And thanks to everybody that dialed in to listen. This was a really great conversation. And I hope that everybody that either listens live or dials in later can get something useful out of this. And if you have any questions about any of the stuff we talked about, like, don't hesitate to DM me on Instagram, or there's a contact form on my website. You can send me an email through there. I'm sometimes really slow to respond, but I will reply. So if it takes a few days, it's not you, it's me. I apologize.
All right, have just the best day ever, and I will see you offline.
All right,
Bye.
bye.